another episode of Unfiltered. As always, we are unfiltered, so I'm going to mention my squeaky chair. Yeah. So in case you ever hear any squeaks, it's very, very, very squeaky. And that's all right. You know, it's just part of the fun. We love it. In case you watched our last podcast or listened to our last podcast, you would have heard at the end there was this question of like, where are the men in missions? And we found them. We found two of them.
There's two.
There's two here. So today we have Denis and Joel with us to talk about men in missions, men in ministry, men who are after God's heart. Oh, so cheesy. So guys, thank you so much for coming. This is great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Tell us a bit about yourself. You go and start, Joel.
Oh, I was just say Denis. Well, I'm Joel. I'm 28. I love basketball. I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. For whoever out there loving Brooklyn, we love it. What else?
That's
I love.
I wasn't expecting that.
That was the last thing I was expecting.
I thought he was going to go with the cats, but
Also, Winston and Tigger, if you're watching this video, those are my cats. We love them. No, love playing music, and I've been here for 10 years in London.
Wow. 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years.
It's a long time.
Ooh. Yeah. So I'm Denis. I'm from Argentina. And I've been, where am I from?
Me too, sorry.
Yeah, I'm from Argentina. I've been with Y1 with the base for the last 11 years. I really like traveling, I say, and I mean, what I enjoy doing in my free time, it would be like running or just being around people. Really, like hanging out with people would be super fun.
Wow, good. As you guys know, we also film this podcast in our cafe, and Denis is one of our
managers. Sorry, no, continue. I was going to say managers.
Also, like our barista extraordinaire. He knows coffee really well. Yeah. Also, I feel like we've talked about you in a few different times in the podcast, so probably they're excited to see you finally.
This is me.
Guys, great. So you mentioned that you've been in missions for 10 years, 11 years, which is a long time.
I'm so sorry.
It's so dang squeaky, honestly.
I don't know if you can hear it.
I'm trying so hard not to move, but like...
Honestly, he had something in the back. It's
yeah.
like someone will play keys.
Oh, yeah. It's like an emotional moment, you know?
Wow. Yeah. This is going to be a really fun podcast. Great. So my first question for you guys is quite a deep one, actually. So prepare yourselves.
From the beginning.
Yeah. We're going to like jump right in, you know? How has being in mission shaped you as a man of God?
Denis is going to answer now.
He threw it.
You took the first one. So.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it has done kind of two things. The first one, it has been like more with my character development, as you could say.
Yeah.
Because I think that when you choose ministry or missions as a man, then the first reaction is like, are you really thinking like... And the first questions are like, are you thinking about your wife, your kids, your future life, you know? So for me, and even when I joined like Y1 and missions, I was 18. And even then people are like, how dare you not go to uni and join missions, you know? So I think that for me, and even for other people that join after uni, I think that the biggest challenge and the thing that helps you grow a lot is to stand on what God said. If God said that ministry or missions is what you're going to be doing, it really takes a lot to actually like keep on standing on that and keep on sometimes explaining it and even fight it sometimes with family members or any stranger that you meet, and then you tell them what you do, and then they're like, oh, and like, are you thinking of doing that long term? Because that's always one of the first questions, being like, like that whole idea is just for fun, you know? So I think that that's one of the things that it helped me a lot to like stand in my character and what God said, and created kind of like a foundation of like, okay, I can choose to do what God is asking me to do and stand on it.
Yeah.
And I think that the second part that it taught me a lot was looking out for like the need and to respond to the need in a way that is so much bigger. Like obviously traveling abroad, it gives you a lot of like a world perspective of it's not only about what I do, but every time that you go anywhere, because you travel to the missions or to serve, you look for the need,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think that it has helped me a lot to, like, wherever I go, I look for how God can work or what God can do. And it has opened my eyes so much more to actually be aware of others rather than what I want, how do I want to build my life, or how can I build my own little kingdom or whatever I want. That I think that is something that as men is like, oh, how can you build the things for yourself? That is a big thing.
Yeah.
Deep. Whoa. What you got over there, huh?
Good luck
like,
following that.
Honestly, going from there, I'm like copy paste whatever he said. No, honestly, for me, I keep thinking about it. Like whenever I came to London and I started with missions, I was 18, so I was just a kid in a way.
Yeah.
And I know 18, I don't know, just kids. I get it. But whenever I came, I was just like, I didn't know anything. I still think I don't know anything yet. But I think by being here in missions and being in such a, let's call it like a healthy environment, I was able to like learn about my identity, learn about my character, learn about where it's my place, where it's not my place, how should I act, how should I not act. Also learning about like boundaries, learning about like how can I bless someone with my personality, with how I am, with my manliness, if you want to call it. But I will say like for me it was something like being in missions shape my character. Of course it gave direction, of course it gave me like purpose, but at the same time I feel like could I have calling everything clear, but if my identity and maturity was kind of low, I would have lose everything of that. So I feel like by being in missions, really my identity as a man really got shaped, and also by being surrounded by healthy leaders. That whenever you're a kid, you're always like looking at people, being like, how do you learn? What do they do? How do they do it? Because I'm not a person that, for example, learns by theory. If you tell me what to do, I'm like, cool. Leaves. But then if I see someone moving, then I look at them and I'm like, oh, I see how they do it. Like I'm not a person that has patience to sit and you tell me the dictionary. How do you? What is a man? How do you do it? I need to see how you move. So by being surrounded by my leaders, by being surrounded by different good friends, I was able to learn a lot about becoming a man in that sense. And I think there's a lot more still to be discovered. And a lot of things that maybe I think as men we have a lot, as men, as women, like we have blind spots. That sometimes with friendships, with being in a healthy environment, they can tell you like, hey dude, maybe you might not realize, but you're doing this and this is not good. So I think in a way it just gave me a lot of awareness about my identity, gave me a lot of awareness about what I bring, and also gave me a lot of healthy examples to follow. And some others not to follow. So let's be
valid.
But I think I don't know if I answer.
Yeah, you did. And actually it made me think like beyond being men in missions, like Abby, I think is also similar in this, that you guys all came. No. That you all came when you were 18, you know? I came when I was 22. So I already like was halfway through uni and had my career and had my own house and all of that. But having come when which I still have had a lot to learn and have a lot to learn. I don't deny that. But we're talking about like how you grew in missions and like, or how you were formed by being in missions. And I don't know, I think my years between 18 and I'm 31, so between 18 and 31 was a lot of learning, which we always know that growing, even though it sounds really glorious, it sounds really beautiful, it means mistakes and it means challenges and failing and
sorry I'm sorry.
Confrontation and all that stuff. So being like men, but also and I don't mean this in any kind of patronizing way, right? But also being boys who came into missions to grow into men, like I imagine it wasn't the most beautiful process. Like how do you have any memories or any stories? I didn't give you this as a prep question, so sorry. Just came to my mind. Like, do you have anything that comes to mind of moments that it was like really challenging? Also knowing that both of you come from environments that there's a lot of women in missions. So how is it to grow up as a man in missions when you're also surrounded by a lot of women? Does my question make sense?
That makes sense. Dennis is going to answer.
I always give you a lot of time. Okay, I think that for me, even talking about the fact of learning by example, I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned the most out of quite I would say a big mistake, because also when you come so young, you come with all of this idea of like, I should be this perfect kind of man. Even as 18, like people, like if you're jumping into anything, like into school, into your career, into anything, you always aim kind of to do your best. Probably not always aim to be the best, but to do your best. And you always, like, so many times, like, you value yourself, or you say, okay, like, people will only support me, or I will only be effective, especially in ministry, if I keep, like, a crazy clean records, and, like, everyone else has their chance to do whatever, but then I started early, so then I have to keep a clean record, you know? Or my leaders or the people around me would only support me if I do well, you know? And I remember this one time that I clearly, this is completely unfiltered, but, like, I got drunk at a wedding.
In missions.
In missions.
Can we take a moment to pray?
You know?
Jesus, we want to ask for
Dennis and Joel
forgiveness.
asked me to leave.
Only time, no.
Forgive
But,
him.
like, I remember that one time, and I remember when it happened, and I remember the amount of shame, and then you're like, this is it, you know, like, I screwed up, like, everyone is gonna hate me, like, and obviously through the process when I got drunk, then they took me home, and then the next day, obviously, I was like, this is it, you know, like, I gotta get out of ministry. But I remember that what impacted me the most was the reaction of people around me. Not only the reaction of women being caring, and obviously I had a harsh conversation with my leaders about, like, what happened, why it happened, and so many more things came out, because obviously you don't just go from being fine to getting drunk at a wedding. But I remember that every time that I left the conversation with the men at the end, because the thing that I did the next day was go and apologize to everyone. But I left the conversation with the men, especially my authority figures of men, to the end. And I remember that the fact that they were there, that they hugged me, and it's not that they understood, but they embraced me, and they kind of accepted me and walked me out of it without any condemnation. I think that taught me the most about, like something that you can learn in a book, you know? It's like, we are believing in you, and we will fight by your side, and even if you make mistakes, which at that point I was 20, and then I was like, I've been in missions for 2 years. And now I look back, and I was like, I was 20, I was kind of still with so many insecurities. I don't want to say an idiot instead of me.
Unfiltered.
You said it.
There it is.
The first word. But I was like,
He did it.
I ruined it. But I remember being like so young, but also, like, in a sense lost in the process of just life. But what I learned out of the situation, and what I learned out of how, like, men embraced me and care and fought with me, like, even getting out of the situation, because it wasn't that I was getting drunk every weekend, but getting out of such a situation that it meant it brought so much shame so quickly. I think that it taught me so much. That it was something that I was like, oh wow, this is how you actually fight. You don't just fight in the good moments or in teachings or in all of these practical ministry activities. You actually stand with people when they get at their lowest, when they are supposed to be examples, you know? So I think that part of humanity has, like, really, like, shaped me to actually just work with other people and accept other people, humanity in the middle of everything.
Wow. That is good.
Yeah, honestly, kind of similar to Dennis, it's like that encounter with grace is what for me is the only memory that I have as growing up as a lad and just walking around and just copy pasting the word that he said, idiot. But I think, like, the biggest memory that I have is just, for so long I always grew up being more a kid of, like, a pastor kid, being like, you need to do this, you need to do that. If you do this, you go into hell. If you don't do that, you go to heaven. That's it. It's like there was 2 routes only. But then coming here and being already over 18 and starting walking, then you start discovering, like, your actions. You won't do everything perfect. And then every time I was failing at the beginning, I was just like, God, what am I here? I'm already failing. I was supposed to come here and save London. And I'm a missionary to change the world. And I was making mistakes with girls. And I was just like, God, I'm not following your calling. But then that encounter with my leaders being like, I coming to them and be like, hey, dude, I fell with this, and that. And they were like, cool, great. Would you mind leading the evangelism tomorrow? And that answer to, instead of bringing punishment to me, they were like, I trust you more. So that encounter of, like, I trust you in the middle of your lowest point, in that point. For me, it brought me like, wow, that shaped a lot in my character as a man, and I learned more through there rather than having a list of all the things not to do. Because I'm a person that sounds like, I don't know if you're into enneagrams, like very enneagram too, like looking at the mirror.
Same. Hey, twin.
What number are you?
I think like 2-1.
Oh, of course,
Me
you're
too.
too. Classic.
You're the best.
She's an 8.
Oh, you're an 8?
Yeah.
Ready to
Sorry. So sometimes I look at the
scared of
mirror.
her.
I'm like, can I move? So I like looking at the mirror and just be like, okay, I want to change this, and this, and that, and I should stop doing this, and this, and that. But through that list, I never learned anything.
Yeah.
But through that moment of grace of being like, hey, can you lead evangelism tomorrow? For me, it was like, wow, that's grace. That's love.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way that I learn more in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I went through the rails in the answer.
No, it's really good because I think something about men in missions or men in ministry, like I joked in the beginning, men pursuing God's heart, like, is that you reflect Jesus, and Jesus is graceful, and Jesus is kind. And I don't want to put all the men out there down, because I really don't want to do that. But I think the world standard of manliness is to be assertive, to be dominant, to be maybe intense, maybe sometimes aggressive, maybe not physically, but like to stand your ground, you know? Yeah. And what you guys both are sharing is about being graceful and being like not soft in a weak way, but about being flexible and to learn and to be humble. So to be honest, I think that's huge. That's exactly what biblical manhood is. And it's really beautiful to hear that that's how you learned that. Also in your walk with God, but in your walk with leaders as well. So.
And it's also so hard because sometimes it's like you see so much like TikTok, Instagram, and like different social media sites, you see different standards of how man is supposed to be. And now I say when I was a kid, I'm like, even the standards change so much. Even like seeing kids that are 24, they have different standards, even to like 27, 24, 22. And I'm like, there's so many standards around, and you're like, wow, we made it very complicated now. So at the point that's when, like, for me, like, whenever I decide, like, I mentor people, I always I love about, like, walking with them in their identity, but also like, hey, be graceful with yourself, because I'm a person that I struggle with grace towards me. So I'm always like, this is kind of like my soft spot when I hear someone doing that, like, oh, I'm the worst. I'm like, no, dude, calm down. So, but you know, it's just like seeing the different standards of people. I'm just like, wow, right now, men, women, they all have different standards that are so hard to keep up in a way, and they're changing every 2 seconds. And what I mean with the standards, I think the word standard is a big word, because a standard means, for me, I base it on the Bible. It's like, I will say stereotypes. So
that's valid.
There's so many stereotypes that I'm just like, wow, I get it why kids are so confused nowadays. And I see it and I'm like, you know what? I have more grace for you. Because in my season, we didn't have that. We got MySpace that I didn't have a lot like that. Sorry, I just honestly. Put my old car in the table. So I'm like, I see nowadays and I'm like, wow, at least I have the willingness to turn off and be like, no, I don't want to see that stereotype. But the kids, that's the only food that they get. And I'm like, jeez.
No, it's so true.
Yeah. Also, I think that so many times we get fed this idea from being very young that we have to have it all together. So you're like, and obviously when you get well into your 20s, then you're like, nobody has it together, you know? But I think that walking, even in ministry, you have to walk together with whoever is leading you, like, and you have to see, and because you spend so much time together, then you get like, again, you get their humanity as much as their holiness in a sense. So I think that helps you a lot to like calm down and being like, okay, we're all in this together, we're all like kind of walking, and like you learn grace through the process. Otherwise what you're fed is that everyone has it together. Like you look at TikTok and it's like, how do all of these people keep on making it so great, and then we're here struggling, you know?
And you're fighting for your integrity every day. And you're like, God, I want to keep it together. And you're like, how do they do it? But it's just like that constant fight of being like, am I doing it right? Like, and you always look at the mirror being like, do I have enough grace? Do I have too much grace? Do I have integrity? Do I have very little integrity? And then it's that constant kind of going back to God, going back to other people, having that compass to kind of go back to God and be like, align me to you. But I feel like there's not that many healthy examples among us.
That's true.
Therefore, it's kind of hard for kids. And I mean, when I mean kids, I don't mean like 5 years old. I mean like I'm gonna say like teenagers or like even older to follow something healthy. But I think for me, I was like, I know how important it was for me to have healthy examples. But nowadays looking around, be like, there's no healthy examples. So what are they gonna follow? So I'm like, so for me, it would be like a call out, be like, we need more examples because two people cannot take over, like cannot be an example for everyone. We need more little hubs of examples around the world. So because the examples are a bit toxic, let's say.
Yeah, it's true. And when it comes to these examples, like obviously in our missional context, we know that there's not many men in missions. It's like the big joke of like, where are the men, you know? And we know that, but I also think like it's hard, genuinely, I think it's hard to be a man who is radically pursuing God. I really think that it's difficult because I think that there's been attack on men from the enemy to like silence, to bring that assertiveness or that determination down, like all that kind of stuff, you know? So the examples.
I saw like a little bird coming. I was like, oh my God, I'm being attacked.
Helping a brother out, you know what I mean?
You also have to speak closer to your microphone, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We will.
Unfiltered.
Yeah.
Always when I'm speaking, she comes up with something that I need to be distracted by. Anyway, it's hard to be a man who radically pursues God. And in order to be an example, you need to radically pursue God, no?
Yeah.
Like you need, like what we're talking about is in order to have that character that reflects God, you have to be radically pursuing him. So what do you think it is that keeps people from like being that example, from being in missions or from being in ministry or like, fighting for that? What do you think as men, what would you say is the challenge in that area, you know?
I don't know. Like I don't have a solid answer about it, but I would say like there's so many different factors that play around the whole idea of like being a man and actually like stepping on that manliness. I think like as we said before, like the stereotypes that you have around, and then you're like, wow, there's so many things that I need to do to become that. Then you're like, I just give up. So I feel like that concept of like, oh, this is too hard to keep up, I'm not gonna do it. So I think like first one is just the lack of pushing through the desert, if we want to call it. And the other thing is like, I don't know, whenever I grew up in church, I grew like as Latin American church, we always saw more women than men in church. And there were always the concept of like every 5 ladies, 1 lad. And that was that comments all the time. And then they were always like, how can we invite more men into it? And I think one of the things that they always spoke about it was about allowing men to be men. And when I mean with this, I mean like, at least as a man, in my case, I'm not going to speak for all of them. I am more a person that I need a bit of a space. I need to actually feel secure, and then I move on it. Sometimes I'm not that fast to take it and go for it. So I feel sometimes maybe as if I see a guy that I'm discipling or mentoring and I see that he's slower to take initiative, I'm just not going to take it from him. I'm going to wait for a second to actually like get comfortable, grab it. And then because maybe the second time it will be faster. So I feel like there's some guys that are maybe they don't go through the awkwardness of push a bit more. So I don't know. I will say there's a lot of fight in terms of like some guys are more less initiative. Therefore, they just wait more for the wave to push them forward. Some of the guys are very good initiative, but then sometimes they burn out because they don't take care of themselves in the process. So you have a bit of both in a way. Like I think as a guy, sometimes I go in both. When I have zero initiative, when I have a low initiative, and then I'm burnt out. So I'm like, well, find the middle. Find the middle ground. So I don't know. For me, I would say that just like lack of initiative, lack of space sometimes. Just because some things they need to get done. We live in London. That London is like, if you don't solve it, if you don't pay, that gets more expensive. If you don't fix it, that's a leak. And so therefore, sometimes maybe ladies are faster to solve things than men. And then the women keeps developing and the men is just looking. So maybe we need to find a way of like the men to go a bit faster, but maybe the ladies to empower. And 100%. And I know that this concept might be like, but at least in the environment that I was growing up, in the environment that I experienced, sometimes I saw very strong women in a good way, very powerful women with a lot of authority, with a lot of like initiative, taking anything, being like, that's a wall, we break it, we go for it. But some other guys that they were maybe in Spanish, we call it like different gear. Maybe the ladies are wearing the fifth one, but the guys are wearing the second one. So like, so sometimes like, and I learned so much through those ladies. And a lot of the things I do nowadays and I change is because of those ladies. But some of the guys, they might feel like scared, or they might feel like, oh no. And that's not an excuse, but it's another thing that adds into the mix in the plate. Whereas the lack of examples, the lack of initiative, someone else taking initiative for you, therefore you never practice it. So, and I feel also mission is a great place to also practice that. More because you live in a healthy environment. That you can practice your leadership, you can practice things. So I hope that men that are already here practice it. They don't just wait for an opportunity. No, what do you have around you? Use it, practice with that. They trust you with the cafe. Take care of the cafe. They trust you with the kitchen. How is that kitchen? No, because God called me to leadership. Yeah, but what are you doing now? So it's just like, for me, it's just like using every opportunity that you have. I think it shapes your character in a way. So yeah.
True. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for me also is like the fact that there's this double standard, like it's the fact that people don't take initiative, but I think that there's this kind of two options. You either choose what we will call like the simple way out of being like in your head, it will be like, okay, I will just get this career and go for this thing. And if I go for this is the bare minimum that I'm asked. Like as a man, you're asked to provide and to show up. Honestly, quite sometimes it feels like the standard is quite low, in the sense of like, if you have a good job and then you provide for your family and then you're healthy, then you meet the standard. So that's an idea that it is there, so you're like, I'm gonna go for there. But also there's a reality that in ministry and in missions, because you work with people or because you are so closely relating with other people, there's so many other like challenges that really force men to grow out of their comfort zone. Because most men grew up, even though not around like healthy examples, but around men. So there's so many times that it's so challenging when the man needs to show up in missions and take responsibility, and on top of that they need to start dealing with their emotions, because it's true, by 18 the main emotions that a guy knows is excitement, happiness, or anger and frustration. And it happens so many times when you're talking to guys and then they're just angry or they're just frustrated, and then you're like, there gotta be some more emotions. But that's also a challenge when you jump into ministry, is that all of a sudden you need to face yourself, and when you're in an environment, any ministry environment will be filled with women, then you also need to learn not only to regulate your emotions, but be aware of other people's emotions. And I think that sometimes it's just scary, and sometimes you get to learn a lot of things, and then you get to grow so much out of like learning in ways that you haven't learned before, but it takes such a toil. And I think that in normal life, or when people go for the easier way, then maybe they're like, okay, having a job will be enough, or having forming a family will be enough, and then there's a crisis within marriage, and then they're like, oh, now we need counseling, so now I need to start. But I think that in a sense, when you go into ministry, because you live so closely with people, you work so closely, then you're forced to that, and sometimes that's so scary. And I remember so many situations having so many arguments or hurting so many people on the way, and then realizing later how I could actually be better. But in the process, you really need to choose, like, okay, if I want to keep on doing this, like, I really need to start working on myself. And that can be something that is really scary, because as men, you're not taught to walk through your emotions, or you're not taught to express them, or even as a grown man, like as a millennial, that people are like, you can cry, and it's like, I don't need to cry, I just need to be able to say when I'm happy or when I'm sad. That's it, you know. And men have a way of doing that in subtle ways, but so many times it's like it's the harder, like being like fully present, or all of these concepts that are like far deeper, that men are like, maybe I'll check out and then I'll do this easy way out, you know? instead of like, okay, let's stand, because you fight for your purpose and for what God is saying, but you also fight for like being truly present, which is a massive challenge.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, it's such a deep answer. And I think as a strong woman, I'm going to be really honest. I said this in the last podcast as well. So
listen to the last one. Go back if you don't know what she's talking about. It was 3 episodes.
Something like that, yeah.
A few episodes ago.
Watch all of them.
Watch all of them from the beginning. Like, share.
He's our promo guy.
Come around.
No, as like a strong woman, I was talking about this with one of my friends recently about how we have in missions. I think my only context is missions, right? I haven't been in a church ministry really. I've been here only. So in our missions context, we've created a culture that women take initiative and guys sit back. You know, I don't mean this fully all the time. Sorry, I live with him, so I'm like, I'm sorry. What I mean is like, even as a strong woman, it's hard for me to ask for help, and it's hard for me to say, hey, do you mind? Like, people will notice that usually if I need to ask for something, I'd like do a little dance, or I'd do it with an accent. Like, you think you could make me a flatty whitey? Because I don't like to ask for help, you know? Yeah. So then if I see a need, which as a woman, I think we have a capacity to see needs. Like, that's also how God designed us. Yeah. But then I need to maybe say to a man, like, hey, you think you can help me? Already it's like so painful, not to ask a man, to ask anyone, literally. And then it creates this like bigger divide of maybe girls who step forward and guys who are like, I don't know when you want me to step or when you don't. And we're like, I got it. And they're like, okay, you know? Yeah. And I've even experienced that a lot with you. I think we've had that a lot in our friendship and also in our leadership together. We've led a lot of schools together, Dennis and I. And there's been so many times that I'm like, Dennis, it's a school of like 7 girls and 2 boys. I got this. Like, I'll make the decision.
Like, move away.
And
sorry.
God's like, you will not. And I find that like, as a woman, it's so important to not to slow down, because it's not that you guys move slower, but to see from your perspective, you know, and to take a step either back to the side, I don't know, whatever direction, and be like, but what are you saying? You know, like I'll give an example with Abby because she's here.
Oh no.
Run.
Does the door follow?
Abby's DTS. We had like a challenging week at one point, and everyone in the base didn't have phones. It was like a time of like seeking God.
Oh no.
Here
and
comes.
Abby had these 3 days really sick, so she was in bed for 3 days without a phone, without a computer, with nothing. Oh, God. Which like on your DTS is already painful, you know? Like she was like going crazy in her room, and I was like, oh my gosh, poor Abby, like poor baby. I'm gonna give you your phone back, Abby, don't worry, I'm your girl. I go to Dennis and I was like, hey Dennis, we're gonna give Abby her phone back, okay? And he was like, no, we're not. Sorry, I'm exposing him.
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah. He was like, no, I don't think so. I think this is a really stretching time for her. And I was like, Dennis, I'm her discipler, and I know her, you know. And like Gabby was there.
The cards on the table.
Yeah. And Gabby was there at the moment, and Gabby was like, no, you're gonna do what Dennis said. Oh, the rage, the injustice.
Flip the table out.
You know.
We know.
But it actually turned out to be something really good for you, and also really good for me.
Here.
You know? Stuck here.
She came back with a stack of books. I kid you not.
I lost the battle, baby. Sorry.
This is yours.
But to say like, maybe in all of my strong womanhood, or in my good ideas, or in my filling a need, or in whatever thing, I'm actually wrong, you know? And I need a perspective of somebody who maybe sees totally different and relates totally different. But I think sometimes in missions, as women, we run ahead, you know? Or we like take initiative according to what we see without asking for advices, especially from guys. It's like, but this is a woman situation here, you know? And it wasn't actually. We really needed your input in that moment, and in many moments, you know? Yeah. So I feel like in what you're saying as well, of like, it's true that maybe sometimes men lack initiative, but I also think sometimes we're like, sit back, I got it, you know? Yeah, in a way of wanting to help. That's what I was saying in the last one. I don't think it's a bad motivation of like, you're dumb. No, I think it's like, we want to help. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, don't worry, Dennis, I'll take this burden off of you. Yeah. And many times he's like, I want to carry it. You know? Like, I want to help.
That honestly makes a lot of sense, because it's like, I was talking with one of the guys, I was always saying to him like, dude, I love, let's say if we need to go to a pub and have a pint, that's fine. But if I know that I'm discipling someone that has a problem with alcohol, because I love the person, I'm going to change it.
Of course.
Because for me, the goal is not the pine. For me, the goal is the person. And in the same way, being like, you know what, I got the answer, but I know that you need this opportunity to step in. It's almost like you sacrifice to your rights to be right, or to your right to something that doesn't harm anyone, but it gives an opportunity for someone else. And I think that's something that is true, because I was just thinking about even like my dad. My dad is someone that used to be a cop, and then he became a Christian, and then he became a pastor. But then as a kid, I always saw my dad very like cold and very like, not cold, how can I say, more like not very emotional. It was the 90s and then early 2000s, so emotions were not a thing. So, and then just seeing him nowadays, that he's a guy that sees me, he's like, I love you, son, and hugs me. So seeing that transformation of being like, he didn't get stuck in one way. He was like, let me seek advice. Let me seek to see what is actually the ways from God. And I feel like, because I was just thinking about, why am I how I am? Why do kids are how they are? And I'm like, okay, the examples and the generations before, but no, so far, every generation does something wrong. That's the truth. They always have one. Of course, the older ones were more straight to the point, very fighty, go forward. And that's something that I admire from my dad's generation. Our generation, some of our generation people, they gave up. They are not really there, but they are more accountable with their emotions. So maybe we learn what my parents' generation didn't have, emotions. But I'm like, how can we find that perfect combination of like the initiative and the strength and the beyond the emotions and beyond the finances crisis and everything, push forward and being accountable with like, hey, you know what, I'm sorry. Or you know what, I need help. You know what, let me cover. So I feel like, because I'm always thinking, I'm like, where did it start all this? Who has the fault? It's like, I'm like Adam and Eve. that's where everything went down. But but it's just like thinking, how can we learn from every generation? And now looking behind, I'm like, okay, I cannot be so much in love with my emotions. I'm like, I don't feel accepted. I don't feel loved. But also I need to push. So it's kind of finding that balance. Again, I say it, but I don't act on it every day. So
much easier said than done.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. No, that's valid. And okay, this is something we also asked in another podcast, but it would be interesting to hear from your guys' perspective. So what do you think is like a requirement, or what will it take for men and women to work in a healthy way together? Not only husband and wives, but men and women. I almost said women and women and women. What is it? Like, what is the requirement? Is it that women, I'm going to provoke, is it that women like sit down and shut up? Is it that men stand up? Is it opposite? You know what I mean?
Wow, you said that.
Unfiltered. No, I don't know. But like, what does that look like? You know, what is some traits? Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I know. For me, I think that it takes a lot of like give and take, to be honest. Because I think that again, you are the person that I led the most calls with. So I remember the first time that we led, that I was like, I was so forward. Also because at a point you gave me a lot of space to like say and take decisions, and so many times I just forgot about everyone's emotions. And I think that you took emotions way more into consideration than what I did. So then I started to like...
It's so unfortunate. To be empathetic is the worst, honestly.
Like, but then I was like completely the opposite of being like, if this is a group decision, this is the logical way to move, you know? But I think that it gives obviously it depends on the group, but I think that it takes a lot of give and take. Because as men, like, we can stay in our nothing box in our head forever, you know? But I've worked so much with women that I know that women are constantly thinking about anything that is going to happen and how they could solve it and the 3 things that they could do to solve it, and men just don't, you know? Like, sadly enough, men, like, if there's an issue, they'll fix it, and if it's a quick fix, they'll do it, and if it's a long-term fix, then they'll find a way to worry about, like, progressively kind of thing, or when it needs to be worried. But I feel that it takes a lot of like learning, okay, as men we work better in this way, but I'll push myself to listen more and to actually worry more, or like take more care of these things that are there. Because also men sometimes like we need things written down. Like we are like, you want an expectation from us, like you want us to do this.
Amen, hallelujah. Yes.
Yeah, like,
preacher, brother, preacher.
When you want it, how you want it, like give me the list, you know.
Yeah.
But then you give us a manual with a TV, and
Good
we
to
will
know.
not read it, you know. But like,
IKEA manual.
yeah,
So
IKEA is so useless, you know. Like because you're like, obviously I know,
yeah.
but obviously I know, and then
Already
you're
did.
missing 3
6
pages.
hours later, it's
Yeah.
still not made.
The wardrobe
Yeah,
became
and
like
then
a
you're like-
bed.
This is an upside down bed. Yeah.
Upside down bed.
Yeah, and you're like, well, I guess I will make it work. So I think that for us, we want it all written down, but women, because they work in a way that they think of every possible solution, so many times they have the expectation of like, oh, I expected this, and then, but it wasn't. So I think that that's always the issue of communication, of being like,
Yeah.
oh, you were expecting me to be there at that time and do this and react to this.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was part of the job, you know, it was part of what it needed to be done, but I didn't have it written down.
Yeah.
So I think that it's always a compromise of being like, okay, so I can start thinking a little bit more,
Yeah.
or being more like thoughtful in this, and maybe thinking about how this will affect emotionally to more people, or into their load, and then how am I in the other sense, even being not heard, but being communicated to. Because I think that also sometimes, also like I think that a healthy balance is that men will open with men in a way that is very, like not superficial, but we can get our emotions through very quickly and like close the box and kind of pass them by. But I think that with women it's an easier way that when women ask how you're doing, then you're easier to like be more honest than when men ask, because women understand and deal with emotions in more of a, in a sense, in more of a daily basis than what men
Minutely.
do. Yeah, so sometimes like for a man will be absolutely like hard to tell to another man like, oh, I'm really anxious today. You'll say like, oh no, it's been a hard day, but you know, you go through, or I went for a run, whatever. But if a woman will ask, even if it's just at a work setting, then you'll be like, oh no, today it's been really hard. Yeah. So I think that, and sometimes you don't need an answer, you don't need to fix it, you don't need anything. But I think that it's always that balance of understanding like, okay, how can I mold myself or be flexible, and how I can like
be adaptable.
Yeah, be adaptable.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's funny because before this podcast, we got together and he asked me like, so how are you doing? And my first thought was like, tell him about your life, but like the practical side, like your work, your wife, cover those aspects. And then I was like, be honest. And I was like, no, this is what's going on, and this is what is happening. But I just remember like my first thought was like, tell him the superficial. Start with that. Break the ice. Paint the canvas. Prepare it. But then I was like, no, why? Why do I need to take such a long route? And I feel like, I don't know. And also another thing that I was just thinking between like the relationship of men and women, I feel like the word honor should be in the middle. If we are able to honor each other, not because we always speak about it like women honor men, but what about men also honoring women? Both in a way, just balance it there. Because
Rosanna will be so proud of you right now.
Almost
Roxanne, if you're looking at me, that's for you, Roxy. But in a way, it's just like if the word honoring will be there, but not just being like, I honor you, actually acting on it. Because I'm a person that grew up in a culture where we speak a lot and we tell the most poetry and beautiful things, but sometimes our actions are not really matching the words. So if there will be that balance of what we speak and what we said, we start honoring, we start respecting each other. And for me, honoring and respecting, for example, like women, for me, it took a long time. Because, for example, I remember when I came here, I came with my Argentinian mentality of like being super touchy and being super like, hey, how you doing? And like very too much in a way. But then I came here learning that people were feeling uncomfortable. And my first excuse was like, but that's how I am. That's my culture. This is how I move. But then I was like, but wait a minute, is it about my culture or is it about respecting the person? It's about honoring the person. So I had to sacrifice and suck it up a lot. Just be like, hey, it's not, you're not in Argentina, you're in England. hi from far away. So and that's too much. So put the hand down. It's like hi.
Nod.
But
No, I can't touch.
it's just like
Y'all right? No. Okay. Cool.
how you doing? How's the weather? Great. Love it. But yeah, I feel like honoring is such a strong aspect because I feel through honor you can learn so much about loving the person, encouraging the person, pushing the person.
Yeah.
But as well, like we're speaking from a perspective of 28, 29, but still, I feel like the older you get, it's also things that we're gonna keep learning how to honor in an older stage.
Yeah.
Because even the younger kids, maybe sometimes they feel like, that's for the older ones. We should try to honor all along. And it's something that is so important because you can have the most beautiful calling, you can have the most beautiful ministry, church, and everything, but if you don't honor, what's the point?
Yeah.
Because even through your words, through everything that you do, you honor. You bring people up. You see the best on them.
Yeah.
And in terms of men and women, you see the potential in men, you see the potential in women, and you call that out and with your actions. So, and it's, I don't know, it's just something I always keep thinking about it. But it's so funny because we don't always act on it. I don't always act in, I'm like, today I'm going to honor.
Yeah.
I see a girl and I'm like, move. But then I'm like, no. Then I go back to bed and I'm like, wow, you were so bad. But even like with like Kelsey, my wife, like she's someone that is way more pushing forward than me. I'm more a person of being like, how is everyone doing? The vibes are vibing. Great. Now we're going to start. She's like, hey, you need to do this. You need to do that. But I seen her all the time kind of stepping back and allowing me to speak. And I was like, she has all the capacity to run it better, anything that I do. Because she's way more clear. She has the language. She has initiative. She has the point. She's clear-minded. I'm a person that start speaking and then you're like, blah, 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 blah. And then people are like,
yappy.
Yappy Yappy's back.
He's number 7 on the list.
Oh, thank you. But she allows me to, even whether it's fail or do it better. But it's just that thing that she's allowing me to like be in honor. Yeah. She's honoring, she's respecting, and I'm respecting her. Yeah. Because also if I don't know, I just turn around. I'm like, hey, I don't know. Do you mind taking over? So I think honor is key. Yeah. Let's bring back honor.
Yeah. And like break out of our boxes, you know, like like you were talking about stereotypes. I think sometimes as women we put men in a box. Like I, for example, didn't know that you want things written down. That's like so helpful. Like we should have a teaching of like how men like to be communicated to and how women like to be communicated to. That would be so helpful.
Do we all have Notion? We can do a Notion.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what Notion is?
No. I was pretending.
Yeah. I was like,
sure.
You guys, you're missing out so much. Notion is almost like notes that you can put inside. You can make channels and you can make different folders and you can break. Kind of.
It's like Discord.
Kind of. But no.
Is it? Oh.
But in a way, you can break it down for men, just being like how to speak to men, how to talk to them if they are sad, how to deal with sadness, how to live. So you can just do it for Dennis.
Wow.
I can send you the link.
Oh, wow.
No, I just think it's really interesting because maybe like similar to what you were saying earlier, there's like an expectation of like, I have an expectation for this man to do this thing. Like, for example, in our cafe, you guys can't see, but we can see that we have a leak. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to do anything about that leak. But I know that actually Dennis constantly does things about the leak. Yeah. I'm focused more on like, how are the customers? Everybody doing okay? Like, you know, I'm the vibes girl sometimes.
We love the vibes.
But Dennis will be like, there's a leak and I'm going to fix that. But I've never said to Dennis like, hey, Dennis, are you going to fix that leak? You know? But probably at some point, I'm using you as the example a lot. I'm sorry. It's because you're on my right. It just happens that way. But I think, like, we don't always communicate those things. So then when it doesn't get done, it's like, those men, like, so lazy. And that's not fair because there was no communication. Or, those women always take over. But it's like living in the boxes. So it's about being adaptable, being honoring, which means breaking out of the box to let that person be what they are. And then, and like you said, ask for help if they don't know or whatever. So,
but also, like, we live in such an unhealthy culture that even we're so confused, all of us, that at the point sometimes you're like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? So that's why, like, even as we're speaking now, I'm like, God, I hope that whatever I'm saying is not going against your truth. Yeah. Because at the same time, we also experience in this culture, and we are learning and adapting to where we're living right nowadays. Sometimes I think, I'm like, how many things I'm experiencing and living through TikTok, Instagram, anything, is becoming part of me. So even talking now, I'm like, God, I hope that I'm not talking some rubbish. I hope that I'm like, it's aligned with your truth.
Yeah.
Because even sometimes we can do that. We can become so much part of the culture
Yeah.
that then we start adapting things that are not healthy
Yeah.
as a normal.
It's
So
true.
I'm like, okay, how many things in us, even in a relationship between men and women, have become, I heard that, have become normal. So,
Yeah. It's true.
yeah.
No, I think it's really good. And it's interesting. One of our last questions was like, what would you say to encourage? But I think you both have shared a lot about that already, actually. And you shared a lot about like what to be more expansive across the generations, but also, yeah, how to grow up the next generation or how to grow up the next level. And I know that you're worried about not being honoring of God's word, but actually I just want to really honor both of you, because what you have communicated in this time is humility, being adaptable, being honoring, being loving, being kind. And I think those are really lines of God's truth. So maybe we didn't be like, and then in Romans, like we haven't jumped into this physical scripture.
Yeah.
But I think what you guys are fighting for and what you're reflecting and representing is who Jesus is. And so we honor you guys as men in missions.
Woo. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us
It was
your
great being
experience.
here.
We'd love to have you on again. I don't know when, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe when we do that married thing, you and Kelsey can come.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I would love that.
Could be interesting. Kelsey.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything else? I think that's it.
I don't know.
I was in this episode.
What did you think, Abby?
No, I was here.
Right there.
I want to point out we've been talking the last couple days about yappers, and I'm at a table full of yappers.
Yeah.
There was
space.
There was space for you to pitch in.
The yapping
Where were
was
you?
great. The yapping's great. I'm not complaining. It was beautiful. But
She was a spectator. It's fine. We all get spectator moments.
It's okay. Just to note, I was here.
Anything else you want to say?
No.
Yap away, Abby.
Come on, we want to hear
Alright.
a question. We want to hear something
I
from
mean,
you.
I did have a question at one point, but then the conversation kept going.
Oh,
No.
Where was
no.
the eye contact? Where was the
It's okay. It was the moment's gone.
Yeah, it's true.
It's okay.
Well then, guys, have a good night.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bless you.
No, thank you.
Enjoy. And we'll see you soon. Bye. Bye.